It's great to see those of you who've joined. I recognise some faces, I recognise some names, and some of you are already part of the community. Some of you are new, so I hope you all get to take away something that's useful from this session, particularly around how Equilibrium can help you tackle your event's travel impacts. So moving towards low carbon alternatives, and also learning how you can use the platform of your event to crowdsource donations, which we will then channel towards climate impact project partners. So bringing events together around this common goal of restoring our environment. And just before we begin, a huge thank you to Phoebe and to John, who are co-hosting the webinar with us today. Thank you for your support. So before we begin, I wanted to I've let you know about the recording and also a bit more housekeeping. So we will have a Q&A at the end. So if you wanted to put your questions in the chat box, and actually if you wanted to just put a little introduction to yourself and where you're from, like the event that you're working with or the organization, then you can. That might be useful for other people to see as well. And then a look at the agenda. So I'll be introducing Equilibrium, a little bit more about our history and our mission, our community, and our impact so far. And then I'm really happy to say we've got two of Equilibrium's climate action project partners with us. So we've got Vicky Wallace, who is fundraising manager at the Rainforest Trust. She's going to be sharing a bit more about their work. They're part of our Trees Plus program. So that's our program which is dedicated to restoring and protecting ecosystems around the world, and also supporting communities who are already suffering the worst effects of climate change, so on the front line of extreme weather already. And also from Agamemnon Atiro, who is the founding director of Energy Garden. So they're part of one of our Energy Revolution programs, and that is a program which invests in community benefit and community-led clean renewable energy projects. Then we've got Naomi Lawson. So Naomi's, there she is, gives a wave. Naomi is Equilibrium's project manager, and she'll be sharing Equilibrium's best practice approach to climate responsible travel for festivals and events. So we were set up in 2015, and we have been refining the process of how events can really work in terms of the best practice to both reducing travel emissions and also engaging stakeholders, and then really maximizing donations to our project partners. So we'll be sharing a bit more detail about that. And then we've got a Q&A discussion. So we're really lucky to have a few of our members here today. So, and not just our members, but our founding members. So we've got Joe. You have to say how you pronounce your surname, Joe, but Bodymede? Bodymede.
Perfect. Bang on.
Bodymede, yes, got it. So she's the Sustainability Officer at Shambhala. We've got Hannah Cox, who is sustainability consultant with Better Not Stop, but she works with From the Fields on Blue Dot and Kendall Calling. And we've got Tess Wilson, who's event operations manager at Boomtown. So we wanted to have a chance for people on the call to ask questions, because we know that we can share a process, but when it comes to actually putting this into practice at your events, you can come up with against challenges. And so we thought we'd share some of the solutions and also the challenges that our partners have experienced as they've gone through the process. So to start with, just letting you know a bit more about Equilibrium. Some of you will know this, but just to recap where we're at. So Equilibrium was founded in 2015, and it really is a live industry response to the climate crisis, and that we were created by events for events. So the charity came about in response to a report called The Show Must Go On, which was launched by Vision 2025, that some of you might have heard of, as an organisation that works across sustainability in live events. And The Show Must Go On showed that up to 80% of the average festival's carbon footprint comes from audience travel alone. So just to be clear, that this was a particular study of greenfield events. So this will vary, like there'll be a huge variety depending on where your event is located. So if you're in the middle of a city centre and there's really good transport links, that might be dramatically less. But this was for greenfield festival sites where a lot of people are driving. So probably 2/3 of the average audience will come by car to that sort of event. So up to 80% is audience travel. But then when we start adding in things like crew and suppliers and artists, then that figure is only going to grow proportionally. So we realized that in order to tackle event emissions, then travel really needed to be addressed. So our founding organisations, Boomtown, Kendal Calling, Blue Dot, Shambhala and Secret Garden got together to found Ecolibrium. And Equilibrium's mission is to move low carbon travel to the heart of live events culture. And what that means is first to understand travel impacts, so measuring emissions from travel, which is a huge challenge in itself, which we'll be looking at throughout this webinar, and then reducing travel carbon emissions wherever possible. And that's through initiatives like getting people out of cars and onto coaches, and car sharing, and working with suppliers in terms of efficiency. So just really trying to change the systems by which we're working within. And that's, that's not something that we can accomplish alone, but there are things that we can do. And then our vision for 2030 is to unite events in environmental restoration. So that's bringing together our whole community of events to invest in our climate. So protecting and restoring ecosystems and supporting communities on the front line of climate change. And really just to recognise that events have this incredible platform by which we can inspire positive change in the microcosm of your event, in terms of creating those global changes we need to see in society. So we just have this opportunity to show what's possible to people. So then a look at our impacts to date. So since we were set up in 2015, we have invested together over £470,000 in environmental restoration. So channeling those donations to our climate project partners. And that's been, that's allowed our partners to plant over 46,000 trees, to invest in 10 thriving community benefit renewable energy projects around the UK, and protecting nearly 17,000 acres of threatened rainforest. And all of that has balanced the equivalent of over 32 million car miles. So to date, we are a community of over 150 organisations. And although our founding membership is at our outdoor music festivals, we now work with many different kinds of events as well. So sporting events, film festivals, book festivals and conferences. And we also work with the supply side as well. So suppliers like Sunbelt and Cube Modular, people like the ticket sellers, and companies who are part of the solution in terms of reducing travel emissions. So Tuned In Travel, Big Green Coach, you might have worked with them at your events, but they put on dedicated coaches to get people out of cars and into shared forms of transport. People like Electric Wheels, who provide electric powered buggies for your event sites. And You Smart Thing are our current partner. So they provide travel planning, which means that people can see the impact of their journey and choose a lower carbon route. So I'm now moving on to introducing some of our partners. So just checking that we have Vicky in the room. Vicky Wallace.
Hello.
Hi, Vicky. Hi. So Vicky is fundraising manager at the Rainforest Trust. Vicky, do you need me to stop sharing so you can share your slides, or are you happy for just to say next slide and I can?
Yeah, if you don't mind me being bossy, I will next slide you.
Just boss me around, sure. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Love that Jaguar photo as well.
Thanks
hi
for
everyone.
Sharing it with us.
I'm Vicky from Rainforest Trust UK. Thanks for the intro there, Bethan. Just going to give you a quick overview of what we're doing through our partnership with Ecolibrium, and how that funding, the portion of the 470k, that's amazing. The portion of that that's coming to Rainforest Trust, how is that making a difference to our climate? So Rainforest Trust has been going since 1988. So 35 years now. And over that time, we have developed a very cost-effective model for creating protected areas. So taking these precious ecosystems across our planet and protecting them permanently in a way that lasts. So that really is our niche. So, there are so many different actions that you can take when you're looking at fighting climate change. You've got your tree planting, your rewilding, your sustainable energy. But where our niche and our specialism is in protecting what's already there, these intact tropical habitats that are so important. And I don't mean to brag, but we're pretty good at it. We've got a great track record. We protected over 45 million acres so far throughout our history. And we take satellite monitoring every year to kind of check those protected acres, are they still standing? And in fact, the latest satellite monitoring, which was performed recently, found that 99% of the forest that we've protected is still standing post-protection. So it's a great track record that we've got. So next slide, please, Bethan. Here's a map of our projects across the world. There's actually been a few new dots added to this map since it was produced, particularly in Brazil and in the Brazilian Amazon. We've got a load of new projects there. You can see the dots in green are the areas that we've already protected. The dots in orange are the ones that we are still working on protecting. And the yellow ones are kind of here and there. Those are the ones that we're actively fundraising for at the moment. And I'm noticing a couple of yellow ones that are actually have been declared fully funded as well since that map was produced. So Ecolibrium's donations are going to the highest priority climate projects out of these, which I'll talk to you about in a bit. But just to give you a few examples on that map, one of the projects in Southeast Asia is a project in Laos protecting an animal called the Asian unicorn. Does anybody know that unicorns exist? So that's a very rarely elusive, very rarely seen animal up in the mountain forest in Laos. You're also supporting projects across the Congo Basin in Central Africa. That's a really carbon-rich ecosystem because the soil there is full of peat, so it's drawing in a lot of carbon and storing it in its soil. And also in South America as well, particularly in the Amazon, where you've got a lot of threatened rainforests there. Your money is also going into that region as well. Next slide, please. So across all of our projects, we're engaging with local partners, local people, and no project is going ahead without the free, prior and informed consent of local people. But what are we actually doing to protect the land? How do we protect these tropical ecosystems? The first step is identifying the most important ecosystems to protect and what are the threats that are threatening those ecosystems. And then we're working with local people to work out what is the best way of protecting it. There are actually 3 different ways that we can protect a threatened forest or ecosystem. The first is through designation. So that's where we're making a new national park, a new reserve, a community forest, where there are legal restrictions on what can and can't happen in the area. We can also directly purchase the land. Where we're funding land purchases, it's not Rainforest Trust purchasing the land, but it's actually local conservationists who will then own the land and they will manage it as a private reserve long into the future. And the final way, which is perhaps the most interesting, is land titling. So that's where we're helping communities who live on the land, who've lived it and managed those lands for generations, to secure the official titles to their lands. So there's proof on paper that these lands are occupied, that they're managed by these communities. And if anybody was to challenge it, then the local communities will be able to have something directly on paper saying, no, these are our lands and here is the proof. Next slide. I'm doing a whistle-stop tour here for you guys. So protecting rainforests is one of the most urgent and effective things that we can do to fight climate change and also to preserve biodiversity. So on my next slide, I've got some fast facts for you as to why protecting rainforests is so important for the climate. I can't see my next slide yet. There we go, a little delay there. So when forests are cleared, when deforestation happens, that's releasing CO2 into our atmosphere, which is a big driver of climate change, as we all know. And it is actually a very significant portion of emissions that are going on at the moment. If tropical deforestation was a country, it would actually be the 3rd largest emitter in the world. So it's actually, tropical deforestation is emitting more greenhouse gases than most countries. And it's actually equivalent to the whole global transportation sector. So think about every car, every plane, every truck, lorry, etc. All those emissions are equivalent to how much is being emitted through deforestation. So it is a really kind of global scale project, that issue that we're tackling here. Ecolibrium donations are going directly to the projects that are the highest priority climate projects. So out of all of our projects, they're all having an impact on the climate, but we then use criteria to select the kind of creme de la creme, most climate effective projects, and that's where Ecolibrium's money is going. Next slide, please, Bethan. So those projects generally fall into one of these 3 categories. Frontier forests, those are the ones that are in imminent risk of destruction within the next 5 or 10 years, and we're working on the front lines to save these ecosystems. Super sequesterers, those are the ecosystems that are actively drawing down emissions from the atmosphere. So mangroves, for example, are drawing carbon down and storing it deep under the ground. And carbon vaults, these are kind of vast old growth forests where we can protect millions of tons of carbon at a really cost effective price. So the threats might not be knocking, these are huge, vast ecosystems. The threats might not be knocking on the door today, but if we can get it protected before those threats come, then it's very cost effective. And that means that that carbon is permanently stored in the ground. It can't then be released back into the atmosphere. So that was my whistle stop tour. On my final slide, I've just got my name and contact information, which if you were interested in getting in touch, finding out a bit more, very happy to answer questions. But I will pass back to Bethan for the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Hi, Vicky. Thank you so much for that. And just to let everybody know that as part of being a member of Ecolibrium, we regularly share updates like this from Vicky. Vicky's amazing at keeping us updated on exactly what donations are doing. So that's something that you can then ask us about, or keep in touch with our newsletter or on our news pages and socials, and then we'll be sharing what those donations are doing, and then you can then share that with your stakeholders so that you get this sense of what their donations are doing all year round. So just checking in with Naomi, do we have Agamemnon here, or is he going to join us? Or
yeah, Agamemnon is, well, no, he's not here yet, but I've just been speaking to him on the phone. He's having some difficulties accessing the Zoom link. So I think, why don't we skip to my section, Bethan, and then hopefully Agamemnon will be able to join at some point. He's just calling me now, so sorry, that was a bit distracting.
That's okay. Well, I tell you what, I can call him, and
that sounds good.
And you can do that. All right.
Okay.
Well. Thanks everyone for bearing with us. Do you want me to stop sharing so that you can share your screen?
Yes, please. That'd be great. Thank you.
Bro.
Okay. Phoebe, sorry, I've just seen that you've shared with me a meeting passcode as well. And if you could share that with Bethan, that would be amazing. Bethan can pass it on to Agamemnon. Okay. Can you all just see my slides okay? Great, thank you. So, yeah, thank you so much, Vicky. It's always great hearing you talk, and there's always new information and new impacts to share as well. So it's really great to hear. And yeah, great to start the session with stories from our project partners like you, because uniting events in environmental restoration by collectively raising funds for organizations like the Rainforest Trust and like Energy Garden, who hopefully you'll hear from quite soon, organizations that are working with communities to take climate action is fundamentally why we exist. But we also exist to help move low carbon travel into the heart of live events culture. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about now. We all know, maybe in varying degrees, that bringing emissions right down is crucial to maintaining a livable planet. We're constantly seeing how crazy erratic weather is currently impacting communities, not just in far-off lands, but as we've seen in the news, it's happening right on our doorstep. So literally right now, whilst raging floods are hitting Sikkim in India right now, we've also just experienced the hottest September on record, which actually sounds quite nice, but we're in October now and it's going to be 22 degrees 22 degrees this weekend, which is pretty wild. So, you know, the earth is still warming. So I just wanted to set the context very briefly and explain why this is happening, because sometimes that's useful. So greenhouse gases are in partly released by digging up fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas, which come from the buried remains of plants and animals in the earth. And fossil fuels, as we know, are used to power cars, planes, factories, and so on. And burning those fuels releases yet more carbon into the atmosphere. At the same time, as Vicky has just said, we're clearing forests for agriculture, and that reduces the Earth's ability to remove carbon from the atmosphere. So the extra carbon traps more heat near the Earth's surface, meaning that polar ice caps are melting, sea levels are warming and rising, and the weather is becoming more and more erratic and extreme, and natural ecosystems are being disrupted. So carbon in the atmosphere has increased massively. There's no sign that that is slowing down, and that's, you know, partly thanks to people like Rishi, who just make U-turns and end up going backwards or round in circles. But what that means is that we have to work together to bring event emissions down. And we believe that starting with travel is super effective because, as Bethan said, it is the biggest contributing factor to an event's overall emissions. So there are lots of solution opportunities. It's not all doom and gloom. And we've been working to make our blueprint for this really clear. So we are asking all of our members to follow this 4-step process, which outlines the road to climate responsible travel. So firstly, measuring and understanding your event's carbon impacts, then making a plan to reduce them in line with climate science, funding climate action, as we've just heard. This is really important, and works towards compensating for your event's emissions whilst you're on this journey. And then a really crucial final step is inspiring others to do the same. So now I'm going to take you through each of those steps in just a little bit more detail. So yeah, firstly, measuring and understanding travel emissions. I just wanted to start actually by saying, at our last Lunch and Learn in June, we ran a quick poll to test some of our assumptions and see how we can best support our festival and event organisers. And so I wanted to acknowledge that clearly, and you know, and we knew this, for a lot of people, this isn't part of their day job. A lot of people we work with aren't sustainability professionals, and we all have a lot on our plates. Time is really limited already without taking on a task that isn't
going
necessarily in your remit. What was that, Bethan? Oh, never mind. So yeah, just wanted to say thank you for showing up and coming to this Lunch and Learn when we know time is really precious. We're just keen to do all we can to make measuring emissions a really quick and easy task for everyone. So yeah, firstly, I think I mentioned scopes briefly earlier. And whilst that terminology is a little bit jargony for a lot of people, it's really useful to distinguish between the different sources of carbon emissions and for reporting on them. So this table breaks them down and illustrates what we mean by scopes 1, 2, and 3. So scope 1, that includes emissions that your company has direct control over. So that's your company, staff, and on-site travel. Scope 2 covers purchased electricity. So that would be for any electric vehicles, for example, on site. And scope 3, and this is the really big and important one, it's where the majority of your carbon emissions come from, which is from audience, supplier, and artist travel. And these are emissions that you can't necessarily control, but you really can influence. We have to get a bit creative. So yeah, as you can see in the far right column on this table, we have the tools which are really simple and easy to use to help you measure your emissions for each scope. And it's just your task to collect the data. I know, you know, as Bethan said earlier, it's not necessarily a simple or easy task, but we're here to advise you on how you can do that. And we're currently working with, you know, the likes of Joe and Tess and Hannah, who all sort of operate within really large scale events to test ideas and create some best practice guidelines to help you do that. So yeah, to run you through our tools very briefly, which we are constantly updating, and we're actually working on a new version now, which we will be launching really early next year. But yeah, so firstly, this is our travel log tool, which you can see on the screen here, and it helps you to measure your staff and company travel emissions throughout the year. So you can also share it with suppliers and ask them to fill it out for your event as well. It should be a quick and easy thing for them to do because they won't have to log loads and loads of journeys, hopefully. You simply input your mode of travel, the mileage, which you can look up on Google Maps, or there's a really useful website called Dougal, which if Bethan's there and not too busy, she might be able to share in the chat. And that helps you work out average distances. And then you just add the number of times the journey was made, and the tool will automatically take that data and convert it into the kilograms of carbon emissions from each journey and the associated costs for mitigating them. And at the top of the sheet, you can see the total emissions in tons and costs for all of those journeys combined. So for measuring and understanding your audience travel emissions, we've got the audience travel reporting tool. And by sort of inputting the same simple data, you'll be able to see a clear breakdown of how people are traveling to your event and the associated emissions so that you can find ways to reduce them. So, for example, you might see that a large proportion of your festival goers are traveling by car with a maximum of 2 people per car, say. So then you might look for ways to encourage people to take public transport or incentivize car sharing. That's just one really simple example, just to give you an idea. And in terms of getting the data in the first place, this is different for every event, which is something that we've learned recently. You may have postcode data from your ticket agent, which can be used to work out the total and average mileage traveled by your audience. If you charge for car parking or provide dedicated coaches, then hopefully that travel data will be available in the ticketing information, or you could use a survey to find out how your audience traveled, either at the event or as a follow-up online. Or your crew accreditation system might allow for the collection of postcodes, which I think is something that Boomtown have been doing. So there's just some examples, but yeah, happy to sort of to discuss what actually works at your event itself. So then the next step obviously is making a plan to reduce those emissions. And this was from the same poll, which really what it showed us is that, whilst people do lack the time and, feel that they may lack the knowledge to measure and reduce their emissions, they have a plan, or they're at least working on it, which is really, really reassuring to see. And it's such an important step, obviously, and something that we really want to help our members more and more with, because that's, one of our biggest tips is it's just getting started with a plan. So yeah, we can support you to put a really simple roadmap for reductions in place for scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And that includes your audiences, suppliers, contractors, artists, staff, and on-site travel. And you can use the template from our new travel guide for festivals and events to do this. And the key thing to remember here is that when you're putting a plan in place, is that climate action must be bold, measurable, and time-bound. And just on the left-hand side here, we've just included some examples of the actions that you can take for each of your stakeholder groups, but there's tons more in our guide, and that we could speak to you about as well. And then just finally, before I hand over to Agamemnon, who I think has joined now, it could flow quite nicely. I'll just speak to you a bit about kind of funding climate action, starting with, what it means, which is, for us, it's supporting people and organizations that are helping to prevent or remove carbon emissions and benefit communities, wildlife, and ecosystems. And that helps you to account for your company emissions in the here and now, whilst you're on the journey to making reductions as well. Why is that important? Well, as I said earlier, we need to halve emissions by 2030 and achieve net zero by 2050. And annual climate finance needs to increase by at least 7 times to meet that objective. So yeah, we need to rapidly scale investment, radically cut emissions, and empower communities to take control. And in terms of how you can take part in that, for events, it's really simple. You just add a climate contribution into the cost of your vehicle passes or tickets, if you can, and then we channel those funds into measurable and verifiable projects that, as I said, reduce, avoid, or remove emissions with our climate action funds, Trees Plus and Energy Revolution. So just to quickly let you know, so Rainforest Trust is part of our Trees Plus program, but that program also comprises 3 initiatives that cover 3 fundamental pillars of environmental conservation. So that includes protection, restoration, and people. And it also includes a verified carbon standard project for organizations that are working towards a net zero carbon target and need the carbon credits for reporting purposes. And then with Trees Plus, Equilibrium also takes a 15% admin fee to support our operational costs, which is the development of our tools and resources to help you measure your emissions and give you that ongoing advice. So yeah, Trees Plus is a really powerful initiative, and I'm really, really pleased that Vicky has been able to join us today to demonstrate some of those impacts firsthand. I think this is going to flow into Agamemnon's piece quite nicely now, because this Energy Revolution. Energy Revolution supports community-owned clean renewable energy initiatives across the UK to help reduce reliance on fossil fuels, promote clean air, empower communities to not only take control of their energy consumption, but to generate income from the clean energy generated that can be put back into the community. As we know, that's more important now than ever before. Whilst the likes of Shell are seeing their profits skyrocket, there's other people that can't afford to heat their homes in the winter. And whilst as resources are being plundered, they're prioritizing profit over human survival. So we really want to support the transition to using clean energy, which has limitless amounts, and support organisations like Energy Garden London. And I'm really pleased now to stop talking and to hand over to Agamemnon Otero from Energy Garden London, talk to you a bit about their work that the Equilibrium community has helped to support with investment. Thanks.
Hello. Thank you very much. Naomi, that was really cool. I'm sorry, I was a little bit distracted. For some reason, Zoom didn't want to jump in. So just checking in, I have 5 minutes? Nod? Yeah, cool. So I will jump in. I'm Agamemnon Otero. I'm Chief Executive for Energy Garden. I'm the founder of 19 community energy cooperatives in London, including Community Energy England. So I'll just drop it like it's hot right now for you guys. So can you see that screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. And is it a straight up screen, or should I go to full? It should be able to do a full view for you guys right now, and then I'll skip in. Yeah.
Yeah,
see
that's
my
good.
screens? Cool. Okay. So let me just get my little timer dingly dongly going, because it helps me to go. Cool. So I hope everybody is well. The community energy revolution is happening. It is underway. I'm sitting across from Lila Fortunato, who 11 years ago, I helped to set up a community energy cooperative on her estate in the Bannister House on the Homerton High Road. And all 3 of her children have gone through the youth training program, and she is now the head of our education program for the schools and the youth training. And we have a cohort of young people who are learning about what's in front of you right now, how to take action and face the climate anxiety that they suffer from. We try to do it through fun, engaging activities. So that means building solar panels and planting gardens, and using the transport infrastructure to do it. So we have built the first community-owned solar on the rail, on social housing, and really tried to go to where the people are. So it's really from seed to solar to society. This is the sort of in a nutshell, like, community comes together to invest into energy infrastructure. The revenue streams pay a reasonable return, 5.5% to people. Funding administration costs dealt with, and then it pays for a full-time education coordinator, full-time horticultural officer, full-time biodiversity lead, engagement officers, financial officers, so all the people are supported, and 100% of the proceeds of that deliver more positive outcomes. And so therefore lots of people invest. We're now the largest community energy cooperative in London. And another visual to get you all happy, because the outcomes for us are really, like honey and beer are easier to talk about, but we do have a whole quantification metric. We have 2.4 billion passenger journeys a year on the London Overground and Underground. So we've been trying to focus in on that, because we can get around 300,000 people engaged every day, from seeing and interacting with between 6 and 15 sessions a week that we're on the Overground and Underground. The idea is that through Equilibrium, you guys invested into Energy Garden through this model here. We installed the solar. The Go Ahead Group, TFL, Buy Our Energy. Any excess we sell on to people like Pucka Herbs, Faith in Nature, Patagonia, and that funds these core outcomes. The core projects of gardens, schools, programs, youth training, and then the outcomes are health and well-being, green spaces, education, awareness. So the model itself is continual, but we've built a dashboard that's, I think, I mean, I spent about 4 years on this, and I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I got the best people I can muster to work on this. And really, we've been around the blocks from the UN to the UK government to the head of Imperial College, and got a sort of a system where we have pre and post surveys, an assessment tool that links the UN Sustainable Development Goals and using proxies for health and well-being across the UK, and come up with a live dashboard that can be visualized so that it's real value that comes out of it, and you can sort of quantify it. And they're all color coded. You can see in here, these are all the color coding things of what are the specific things that it aligns with. Some of the partners. What does it look like? What are you talking about? It looks like this. Those are pumpkins, and those are community members that live around that local garden. These are young people in the youth training program. It's a 3-month program paid at a London living wage, and they're learning, and they make solar panels from scratch. You can see that one on the left-hand side. That's Anna learning how to make that solar panel, installing it on the garden platform. Ishmael on the right-hand side, building in a planter on the side of a tracks. This is the up in Finchley Central community group there, dropping it in bulbs for the next year. This is our harvest party pumpkin carving. This, you guys, more than welcome. If anybody's in London on Saturday, the 7th of October, you please come to our new office. There'll be over 150, I think it's about 200 people have signed up now. It's about 300 square meters of space. It's a beautiful thing. It's we have try the beer and hops that we make. There you go. We pick all the hops with everybody. But what does the solar projects look like? That right there is what Ecolibrium has helped to invest into. That's the largest and first community solar, and now the next one is going up right now as we speak. We'll be installing in November, so that can help us grow. The solar portfolio growing will help us to deliver the gardens, youth training, and the schools programs. So this is our sort of 5-year plan. The next share offer will come out in February, and that's 5 minutes. I hope that was a sort of a good roundup. That's 5 minutes exactly. I can answer any questions, or you can tell the loud American to sit down and shut up.
No, that was really great. Nailed it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aga. It's great.
My pleasure. Do you want me to stay or leave, or what would you like?
I think, Bethan, what do you think? Because we've got a conversation happening with Hannah and Tess and Joe, but we've got about 15 minutes left. So should we, what do you think?
Yeah,
Bethan?
let's, I mean, if anyone's, I think we've got time for a question. If someone wants
Great.
to ask a question about Energy Garden, if anyone's got anything they want to ask, then we've got a little moment to do that. If not, we'll move on to our panel discussion. So feel free to put up a hand, or we can just
Recognize there's a lot for you to fit in there in 5 minutes, Agamemnon. So yeah, we can also like share those slides around, or some of those slides after with people too.
Well, yeah, I'd love to see the slides again. And I was just wondering what proportion of funding, I've heard you speak a couple of times, Agamemnon, and I've always been curious about investment from the local community and then investment from larger bodies.
Yeah, a good question. And I've dropped the website link in there for everybody. So number one is we have 508 members right now, and I think in this next offer we'll probably jump to about 1,500 because the offer is going to be so much bigger. Of that, the membership are local to the gardens. So you're probably looking at 75% of the membership are between £50 and around 350. Then there's 20%, which are into 20, 30,000, and then there's institutional organizations like Ecolibrium and others who are putting in 50 to 100,000. And that community is growing. So there's like 6 or 7 of them who've done that. Like Friends Pub puts in 150, and some other people put in 100 grand. So the idea is that you open out to as many people as possible. I want us to have 10,000 people in London who come, and people that are from all across the UK, so we can travel up the train line. It's about connecting community energy organizations, not separate them out. I want to bring all the community energy organizations together and have like collectives. But yeah, it's really open from £50. So some people they never invested in anything before they invest in this. I learned a lot of that when we were building Bricks and Energy or Voxel Energy or with those.
Great. Thanks so much for the answer. I always love hearing about it. Yeah, I would love to chat to you more one day soon. Thanks. You.
And just to let you all know that, and this is to be confirmed, but we went on a trust. We took all of Ecolibrium's trustees to an energy garden, a community garden, and we're planning on doing another trip and inviting some of our members next year. And so that's in the pipeline. Hopefully, we'll talk to you about that. So yeah, and now moving on to our final section, which is a chance for you to ask some questions. So we've got in the Zoom room, Hannah Cox. Do you want to give us a wave so everyone knows who you are? Thank you. So Hannah works with Better Not Stop. She's the director of Better Not Stop, which is a sustainability consultancy, and you work with From the Fields, Hannah, which works with Blue Dot and Kendall Calling. We've got Joe, who works with Shambhala, Sustainability Officer at Shambhala. Do you want to give us a wave so everyone can know who you are? Great. And then Tess, are you in the room? Yes, hi. So Tess is the event, your operations manager at Boomtown. So we spoke, Naomi's gone through, a really detailed process about how we can help events to measure their emissions and understand them using our tools, and then find initiatives to reduce them, and then to use the event as a platform to sort of crowdsource donations to invest in projects like Energy Garden and Rainforest Trust and other project partners in our programs. But that's, sometimes that can all sound great in theory, but actually when you come to applying that in your own event, that can be, well, there can be challenges, and that things need to be worked out. Every event's got a slightly different system. So we wanted to give people a chance to ask questions, but we know that there are some common challenges. So I'll start with a question which we get quite often, and if you guys want to answer when you can, that'd be great. I'll ask you. But so firstly, really, which is the first step of the process, is measuring data. So data collection can be tricky. So we've got the tools, and you guys have been using them, but it would just be great to know like how you did go about collecting travel data this year, and that can be from audiences, artists, suppliers, or crew, and any challenges or top tips that you've got for people who are in the room. Should we start with Tess at Boomtown?
So I think our approach, and so I'm head of sustainability at Boomtown, but I'm also the event operations manager, and I think that puts me in quite a fortunate position because it means I can influence the processes that we do in a way that sometimes when you're doing sustainability, it can be quite labor intensive to get the right information into the right people, and so that people can have the processes in front of them. But whereas we look after the deliveries office and our accreditation centre ourselves within our team, so we tried to, wherever we possibly could when we were collecting our data, build it into the sort of existing systems that we have, so that it's not a huge massive side job that somebody's got to do, but just a small addition to what they do in their sort of day-to-day activities. So our deliveries officers process all of the vehicles that come onto site naturally, so that we all so that everybody gets a pass in their window, and in that we collect data. So we'd always ask them what type of vehicle they were in, so we knew which route it needed to take around the site. We know which department it's going to, because we need to contact the right person to make sure it goes and meets the right person on the other end. And so the only question that we added into that process, which was the postcode that they left from. So we know that they were arriving at our site, and then we could quite easily collect where they'd come from. And that meant that we could, this year we managed to get the details of 1,200 of our deliveries. Tara, who's actually on the call, did all of our she looks after the music team, or is one of the music team. So she collected the data for the artist travel. But Tara had a huge success this year, so I don't know if it might be better for Tara to let us know how you got on with that.
Oh, yeah, it was actually quite easy for me to collect all our artist travel data because of the system we use for our artist advancing. So all I had to do, every artist we book has to complete an artist advance form in order to get their tickets and everything else that they need. And so within that advance form, I put in questions asking them which postcode they were travelling to the festival from and which postcode they were travelling onward from the festival to, and what method of transport that they were using. And then I made those questions compulsory, so they couldn't move on to any of the rest of the questions until they'd answered them, which meant we got about 97% of our artists' data. There was a few that didn't fill in the form at all, so we lost those. But yeah, it was pretty good this year. We managed to get everything.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's really good. That's a great system.
Yeah, so I think that what we're trying to do is try and get as much integration in as possible, because then we can just extract that data in out of the system, so out of the spreadsheets that we already have, and then put them into the calculators. But it becomes quite an easy copy and paste job then to really quickly pull all of the information out.
Great, thank you. So we can come back if you think of anything else. But Hannah, do you want to share how you've done with collecting data this year, or if there's any tips?
Yeah, well, thank you. Hi. We did okay this year. We weren't as great as Tess. She was much better than us when it came to all the supplier and delivery stuff. We're slightly different, as Tess mentioned. She's head of operations at hers, so it was easy for her to integrate some stuff in. And we're an outside agency, so depending on the stakeholder, we work with them really differently. So for some of the departments, we kind of bring in a team member to support them, and other departments integrate ideas we've had. So as an example, the artist liaison team from the Fields is a separate company, and they're really, really easy to work with. So what they did is when they were sending out their artist advances, a lot of the questions around travel they were asking integrated into those questions to artists. So we were finding out not just where artists were coming from, but where they were going to next as well, which made us able to really measure that data a lot easier. And then from a kind of audience perspective, usually that's quite easy because for Kendall calling in particular, people buy car parking passes with their tickets, and we're able to see their postcode from where they bought those car parking passes from. So we can get a bit of an idea on, you know, how many people are coming in cars and if those cars are being shared and things like that. I think the big piece we took away from the work we did this year at Kendall Calling, especially when we were looking at how the audience were arriving at site, whether that was car, coach or train, was actually, are we actually doing enough to make it easy for our audience members to make more sustainable choices? So we're actually reviewing our travel processes and our kind of pre-audience comms to make sure that if we are asking them to make a more sustainable choice, like a car share or take the coach or take the train, are we as an organisation making that as easy as possible for them and making it actually an attractive choice? Because there's lots of reasons why people don't take the coach or the train. So we've gathered a lot of data from asking audience members at the event this year, trying to find out why they're not using those options, and then thinking, how can we actually make it easier? So it'd be good to hear if anyone's got any questions in the chat or any particular things that their audience will probably say to them and what we can do to counteract them. Happy to answer. But we know how many people came by public transport last year. We've put together a percentage increase that we want to increase those audience members by next year, and we're just looking at how do we actually do that in a really supportive way, because it's got to be easy for them, it's got to be affordable for them, and there's got to be some added value to those audience members to make that choice. Because as a lot of us know who've gone to festivals before, you usually bring a lot of stuff with you, and it's actually sometimes a lot easier to drive your car straight there, stick everything in the car, and then take it to your campsite, rather than maybe have to get to a train station or get to a coach stop, carry all your stuff in a different place. So we're just thinking, like, how do we make this easier for people and make it something that's a really good, attractive idea for them to come to the festival in this way?
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, and that's that sort of leads on to the next sort of question, which is about how to engage audiences and your stakeholders in the initiatives that you're using. So I think we could let's move into that. But before we leave data gathering completely, it'd be great to hear from you, Joe, about how you've done with Shambhala this year. And also, because we've already sort of opened up this conversation into initiatives, which is great, Hannah, thank you. Then if you've got any initiatives that have worked for you in kind of answer to what Hannah was saying, then that would be great to hear.
Oh yeah, fabulous. Thank you. So nice to meet everyone. So let me grab my notes. Yeah, on audience, we have an automated donation system at the ticket sale, which works perfectly. So our offsets go through at that point of sale, £1 for cars and £3 for vans. So obviously that works perfectly well, 100%. So you can't really fault that. And then the other areas that we really focused on this year were like deliveries and supply for infrastructure, for everything. Yeah, it sounds like tested great on the gate. And we did a similar thing, just using the people on the gate to kind of map what was coming in. It was kind of quite sporadic because obviously the people on the gate weren't other sort of eco nerds who didn't care as much as we did. So we thought, in future we'd have to get a team being on the gate to monitor. But we also have a back end system in our Eventry delivery pass sort of process where contractors and suppliers have to go in there and enter their details. But we tend to find that sort of a small percentage of people take that voluntary step. And it's been the same with artists as well. So we have a process by which artists can go and offset their travel via ecolibrium. But again, we find it's like a small percentage of people that do that. So this year I put out some manual like clipboards in all the dressing rooms to gather some data. Again, not everybody filled them out. And we sent a survey out. So what we've got is a sample of data for artists. Quite interesting with Shambhala that we've not got massive main stages. So we haven't got to contend as much with like our artists coming from all over the place internationally, and are they touring, and how do we divvy that up with other festivals? We've got like 1 or 2 stages where that's the case, but the rest of them seem to mostly come from Bristol, so we're probably going to try and organize some cruise shuttles from there. So that's quite a useful thing to gather, where your artists tend to be coming from, and can you do some shuttles from major cities. But exactly like I think Hannah said, it's then about incentivizing audience, artists and crew to take that transport step. So yeah, audience we're pretty clear on, and we've got about a quarter of our audience coming on public transport, and we incentivize that with lower costs. I think we probably need to step that up a little bit to improve that metric by either offering some more financial benefits, or indeed perhaps some fun. I've always thought this with Boomtown as well, with the story and Shambhala, with the area, all of the stages we have, there could be some fun sort of like VIP treatment for those who've got a public transport band, and that could really start to radiate out within the festival. Because my past is working on campsite engagement with regards to recycling, and so we just do simple stuff like we give the head eco person in the campsite a medal and be like, you're on top of it now, and then they would tell all their friends. So we kind of know that those like tiny little inexpensive kind of exclusive things work really well. So I'm looking at that for audiences. And then with regards to deliveries, supplies and artists, I think it's just going to be a case of following suit of what you've done, Hannah, with your advance sheets, and just when people are getting paid, that's when we've got to gather the data, because otherwise people are just too busy, and it's fair enough, if it's not their biz. I think that's pretty much it.
And just to clarify, Joe, because you were talking about the cost, so one of the initiatives that you have in place is that it's cheaper if people come by public transport. So that's cheaper in terms of the ticket, the whole ticket cost is cheaper. So it's like an entry ticket plus transport. And that's the same with coaches, is it? You do
exactly. Cycling, coaches and train. And then we have a bit of a system on the gate for, obviously if someone turned up and something awful had happened and they had to drive with a mate or whatever, we've got that kind of leeway with our stewards on the gate. But yeah, on the whole, if people have bought those tickets, they must arrive on that piece of transport.
Great. And so just coming back to Boomtown, because I know that you have some great initiatives in place. I know we've got 1 minute left, but we can just go maybe a few minutes over, because I know John's also asking some great questions in the chat box as well. But it would be great to hear, you know, just actually what initiatives you have in place and what's worked really well in terms of, well, we seem to be focused on audiences. So let's, if we keep looking at that.
One of the things that we introduced was the when the festival got extended so that it opened up on the Wednesday, that the tickets for that mean that you have to travel by public transport, so it's linked together. So in order to, there's a very small amount of tickets that are available for people driving cars, but if people want to extend their weekend so that they can come on the Wednesday, they have to travel by public transport. One of the questions that John had asked was about industrial action and how that impacts public transport. This year we had rail strikes for most of our ingress days, and it didn't have any impact at all. I think we had exactly the same amount of people traveling by train. They were just really heavily loaded onto the 1 hour trains, but we were working quite closely with the rail networks to make sure that it all worked smoothly. But it really didn't have that much impact, because I think people that have decided that that's how they're coming, they were kind of committed to it, so they did. This year, one of the things that we're going to try and introduce, we used to have a cycle scheme, but we didn't have much uptake on it, so we're expanding it out so that it's a bit more like a holiday, and you stop off midway. So it will come from Bristol, and we'll take people's luggage for them. They'll stop at a campsite sort of part of the way of the journey, and then when they get there, if they've signed up to the cycle scheme, then they get free access to one of our premium campsites, so where we have slightly nicer camping areas with better facilities and more showers and things. So you get that for free if you cycle to the event.
Brilliant, thank you. And just looping, there's two things in my mind, but looping back to the issues that people have had with getting people to fill out the forms, just coming back to your point, Tara, of how bringing it into the system so people literally can't move on until they've done that piece of data collection is like brilliant. Like if we can find a way to make that work, you know, in terms of back-end systems, so people need to do that before they can move on to the next stage. And I think that sounds like genius.
Yeah, that's what we built that into the wider accreditation system as well. So we were using it in our crew. So when everybody who has a ticket, they have to put in their sort of home address, and it's the compulsory box that you can't complete your accreditation until you've given us that bit of information, which is a good way of prizing stuff out of people.
Yeah, great. So just, I know we're 2 minutes over, but just finally the last point, I know that Joe, you mentioned about collecting donations from audiences. So that's obviously the last part of the picture in terms of how Ecolibrium works to fulfill that part of uniting events in environmental restoration and gathering audience donations for our project partners. So it'd be great to know if you're trying anything different. Maybe coming back to Hannah, it would be great to hear how you're working at Blue Dot and Kendall to do that. I know you've slightly changed the system or you're thinking of changing the system for 2024.
Specifically with the audience, well, I think what we're just trying to look at is what challenges will come back to us when it comes to the audience. I mean, Joe was talking then about providing the audience like something special at the festival, and that's definitely something we're looking at. I think there's an accessibility issue too. So I think just whenever we're talking about audience travel, we're just, it's a obvious one anyway, but it's just like, if we are going to give incentives for public transport for those of our attendees that aren't going to be able to use public transport for whatever reason, it's making them not feel guilty. We had the same, we had kind of had the same thing with our Leave Nothing But Memories campaign with our tent waste. We were like, do we reward the people for taking their tents home that wouldn't usually? And it's like, well, that's not really fair on the people that are just doing it anyway, because they're just being conscious people. So it's about, okay, so it's rewarding the public transporters, but also those people who can't do that. How do we still make them feel kind of part of like any kind of eco campaign that we're doing? I think something we're mainly looking at is how do we work with, and John's kind of mentioned this in the chat, how do we work with the local authorities to try and support, for them to help us support that campaign to happen? I mean, traffic management for most festivals, whether they're city centre based or greenfield based, there's always that issue on the day in and the day out of people that live in the local area having their, not like thinking, well, I'm not going to bother leaving the house today, or I'm just going to go away for the weekend while the festival's on. So how do we try and kind of maybe push back a little bit with local authorities about how they offer that support, whether that's through an increased local bus schedule, or just any kind of general support with our traffic management, because it's kind of affecting people in the local area too. And for a lot of festivals, it affects your license as well. Like if you're going to increase your capacity and you're going to have more people coming to your event, how can you show you're not going to increase like the push on the infrastructure in the local area? So there's lots of things we're kind of thinking about at the moment. No like answers, but yeah, just
great. No, thank you, that's really useful. And I was wondering about and how you're, because I know that I was thinking about Blue Dot and Kendall adding a donation based on the average distance onto tickets. So I thought it was like you were trialing a different way of adding donations for Equilibrium onto tickets.
Yes, sorry, yeah.
No, it's good. It was really good to hear about that, bringing in the local authorities as well, because you're right, it's not all on an event. It's, you know, we're working within a system which needs to change, and so it's, you know, putting pressure on local authorities or just letting them know about the issue is really important. And has anyone got any more questions? Because I just know we're 5 minutes over and we've already taken up so much of your time. Any last questions from audience, from anyone else on the Zoom? No, I think that's everything. But I just thank you so much for joining us, Hannah, Joe, and Tess, and to Agamemnon, and to Vicky, and to Naomi, and to John and Phoebe for hosting. And Tara, thank you for your input on artists. That was really, really useful. And this is recorded, so we'll make this available to all of our members. But if I missed a question, if I've missed any questions in the chat, I'm really sorry. And thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate all the speakers and everyone for coming along. Have a nice day.
Great to
Thank
see
you all.
everyone. Thank you.
Cheers.